The little girl saw her mother's photo in the millionaire's office and asked the CEO, "Why is my mommy there?" The CEO was shocked. Thomas Harrington's office occupied the entire west side of the 42nd floor of Harrington Tower, a structure of glass and steel rising like an accusing finger over the financial heart of Manhattan. From there, he could see Central Park stretching like a green carpet between the skyscrapers, the Hudson River shimmering in the distance, and the tiny lives of millions of people who would never know his name, but whose financial destinies he influenced with a phone call, a signature, a decision made during a business lunch. It was 3:30 on a Thursday afternoon in September. Autumn had begun to turn the park's trees golden, and the air conditioning kept the office at exactly 19 degrees Celsius, just the way Thomas preferred. He had just finished a video conference with investors in Singapore when the door opened without his approval. He looked up, ready to reprimand whoever had dared invade his territory without announcement, and saw a woman wearing the navy blue uniform of the cleaning company. She pushed a cart of cleaning supplies and held the hand of a child, a little girl of perhaps 6, with brown braids and eyes far too big for her small face. "Sorry, Mr. Harrington," the woman said quickly, her voice tense. "Lily's daycare closed today because of a leak. I had no one to leave her with, and I promise she won't get in the way. She'll sit quietly while I clean." Thomas should have said no. He should have called HR, complained to the outsourced company, enforced the strict rules that kept his empire running like a Swiss watch. But something in that woman's voice, a familiar timbre he couldn't immediately place, made him simply nod and turn his attention back to the reports spread over his mahogany desk. Clara Bennett began working in silence, just as she always did. It had been 3 weeks since Spotless Services assigned her to clean the executive offices during the afternoon shift. 3 weeks in which she had developed a meticulous routine. Arrive at 3, start with the outer hallways, leave the CEO's office for last, when he was usually already gone for external meetings or business dinners. But on that Thursday, Thomas was there. And for the first time in 18 years, Clara Bennett had to walk into that office knowing he was present, knowing he could look at her, knowing he could recognize her. She had lost weight, a lot of weight. Her hair, once long and shiny, was now cut short, with premature gray strands at her temples. Her hands, which he remembered soft and delicate, were rough, marked by years of chemical products and manual labor. She wore cheap glasses, one of those generic frames sold in pharmacies for $20. No makeup, no jewelry. Thomas glanced at her as she emptied the bin beside his desk and didn't recognize her. Why would he? She was just another invisible worker, part of the silent machinery that kept corporate buildings running, that cleaned executive bathrooms, picked up forgotten coffee cups and crumpled papers tossed carelessly aside. Lily, however, did not stay quiet as promised. She was a curious child, the kind who asks too many questions and observes the world with eyes that capture every detail. While her mother worked, Lily wandered slowly through the office, admiring the diplomas on the walls, the crystal trophies on the shelves, the framed photographs telling the story of a man who had built an empire from nothing. And then she saw it. The photograph had been there for years, among dozens of others. Images of Thomas shaking hands with presidents, giving speeches at conferences, posing beside his ex-wife at gala events. But this one, in an ornate silver frame, showed something different. It showed genuine happiness. It showed a younger man, eyes filled with hope, holding the hand of a woman who smiled as though the entire world fit inside that moment. "Why is my mommy there?" The words came out with the brutal innocence of children, the kind of honesty adults spend their whole lives learning to hide. Lily pointed at the photograph, her small fingers touching the glass, leaving fingerprints on the young woman's smiling face. The reaction was instant. Clara dropped the cleaning cloth she was holding. The wet slap of it hitting the marble floor echoed like a gunshot. Thomas felt his heart hammer violently, a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt since that day 18 years ago when Clara Whitmore walked out of his apartment in the village saying she couldn't keep going, that he would have to choose, that she wouldn't be the other woman while he married for financial convenience. He looked at the cleaning woman, truly looked, for the first time, and he saw the green eyes, the scar on the chin, the way she bit her lower lip when nervous. How had he not recognized her? How had he allowed himself to become so blind? Clara, he whispered, and her name came out like either a prayer or a curse. He couldn't tell which. She finally lifted her eyes, and in them was everything. 18 years of anger, pain, sleepless nights in degrading jobs, diapers changed alone, fevers in the middle of the night with no one to help, overdue bills, choices between food and medicine, silent Christmases in tiny Bronx apartments where the heating barely worked. "No," Clara said, her voice strangely firm. "Don't do this. Not now." But Lily didn't understand what was happening. She kept looking between the photograph and her mother, her young mind trying to process the impossible. "But Mommy, that's you. I know it's you. You have the same dress in the box under the bed. I saw it when I was looking for my colored pencils." Thomas rose slowly, as if moving through molasses. His eyes settled on Lily, really settled on her for the first time. She had his eyes, not the color, but the shape, the almond shape, the intensity, and that dimple on her chin when she frowned, trying to understand the tension filling the room. He had that same dimple. "How old is she?" Thomas asked, his voice hoarse. "Don't do this," Clara repeated, less firm now, more desperate. "Please, Thomas, don't do this." "How old?" "6. She's 6. The math was simple, brutal in its clarity. Clara had left his life in March 2018. Lily was 6, born likely late 2018, November, maybe December. Thomas felt his legs weaken. He grabbed the edge of his mahogany desk, the same desk where he had signed contracts worth hundreds of millions, where he had made decisions affecting thousands of jobs, where he had built a reputation as an implacable, calculating man who never let emotions interfere with business. "She's mine," he said. It wasn't a question. Clara didn't answer, but her silence was enough. "Why didn't you tell me?" Thomas's voice rose, thick with emotions he hadn't allowed to surface in decades. "Why the hell didn't you tell me you were pregnant?" "You were engaged," Clara finally exploded, her restraint breaking like a dam. "You were getting married in 2 months to Catherine Rothschild. 2 months, Thomas. Your fiancé was in the tabloids picking wedding flowers while you told me you loved me. What was I supposed to do? Knock on the Rothschild mansion door and scream that I was pregnant? Destroy your life? Become a tabloid headline as the mistress? The affair? The homewrecker? I had the right to know. You had the right to choose," Clara shouted back, tears spilling after 18 years of being held in. "And you did choose. You chose the Rothschild money. You chose the corporate merger. You chose your damn empire. You told me, Thomas. You looked me in the eye and said you had to go through with that marriage because it was strategic. That was the word you used. Strategic." Lily started crying, frightened by the shouting. Clara immediately knelt and held her tightly, whispering apologies, telling her everything was okay, that Mommy wasn't angry at her. Thomas watched as if outside his own body. That child, his child, wearing thrift store clothes, shoes with worn soles, braids done in a hurry because her mother probably worked 2 or 3 jobs and had only 15 minutes each morning to get her ready before rushing to an early shift. He thought of Catherine, the woman he had married for convenience in June 2018. The marriage lasted 4 years of appearances at social events, separate bedrooms, and empty conversations about the stock market. They divorced civilly in 2022, dividing assets with the coldness of a business transaction. No children. Catherine never wanted them. She said they would ruin her figure and interfere with her philanthropic career. And meanwhile, Clara had been raising his daughter, their daughter, alone. In some cramped apartment in the Bronx or Queens, working night cleaning shifts, probably skipping meals to make sure Lily had enough to eat. "I looked for you," Thomas said quietly, the anger draining from his voice. "After I divorced, I looked. I hired investigators. I changed my name," Clara replied, still kneeling, still holding Lily. "I went back to my mother's maiden name, Bennett instead of Whitmore, moved to the Bronx. No Facebook, no Instagram, nothing. I didn't want to be found." "Why?" Clara finally met his gaze, and what he saw there made him feel smaller than he had ever felt, even in the lowest moments of his career. "Because I had pride," she said simply. "Because I didn't want you to look at me and Lily as a problem to fix with money, as a complication, as a legal responsibility. I wanted that if you ever came into her life, it would be because you wanted to, not because you had to." Silence fell, thick, heavy. Outside the panoramic windows, Manhattan kept dancing indifferently. Helicopters cut the sky, cars honked below. The sun began to set, throwing golden rays across the glass towers. Thomas walked slowly to where Clara knelt. Lily had stopped crying, but her eyes were still red, confused. He knelt too, lowering himself to her height. "Hi, Lily," he said softly. The girl watched him warily, clinging to her mother. "Your mommy and I," he began, but the words faltered. How could he explain? How could he condense 18 years of regret into words a 6-year-old could grasp? "We knew each other a long time ago," Clara said, her voice trembling. "Before you were born, and we were friends, very close friends." "Like Mrs. Martinez and Mr. Rodriguez from next door?" Lily asked, referring to the elderly neighbors who always gave her cookies. Clara nearly smiled through her tears. "Something like that." Thomas slowly reached out and touched Lily's cheek. She didn't pull away. "Do you like ice cream?" he asked. Lily nodded shyly. "What kind?" "Chocolate with brownie pieces, but it's expensive, so Mommy only buys it sometimes." Something broke inside Thomas. His daughter, considered a simple ice cream an occasional luxury. He stood and returned to his desk, hands trembling as he opened a drawer and pulled out his personal checkbook. Clara realized what he was doing. "No," she said firmly, rising. "I won't accept your money, Thomas." "Clara, let's be realistic." "No!" She cut him off, her voice gaining that strength he remembered from their youth, when she argued passionately about literature and social justice in his tiny village apartment before everything fell apart. "I don't need charity. I take care of my daughter. I always have." "Our daughter," Thomas corrected, and hearing those words come out of his own mouth felt like waking from an 18-year dream. "And it's not charity. It's responsibility. It's everything I should have been and wasn't." Clara stayed silent, her jaw clenched. "At least," Thomas continued carefully, "at least let me help with her school, with health care, with the basics." "The basics," Clara repeated bitterly. "The basics I've been handling alone for 6 years." "I know, and I will never be able to make up for that. Never. But Clara, don't do this for me. Do it for her." Clara looked at Lily, who now watched the two adults with that puzzled expression children have when they sense something important happening but don't quite understand. "I need to think," Clara said at last. It's a lot. It's too late for many things, but it's still a lot. Thomas nodded, putting the checkbook away. All right, but Clara, I want to be in her life, not as an obligation, not as a name on a check, as something real. You can't just show up after 6 years. I know, but I want to try. Let me try. Clara took Lily's hand and walked toward the door, her cleaning cart forgotten in the corner. But before leaving, she turned back. You know what's funny, Thomas? I took this cleaning job because it paid $3 more per hour than the other places. $3. I didn't even know this was your building until the second week. And when I found out, I thought about quitting. But I needed those $3 extra. She let out a humorless laugh. Fate has a cruel sense of humor, doesn't it? Thomas had no answer. Clara and Lily left, leaving him alone in an office that suddenly felt too large, too empty. He returned to his desk and picked up the photograph. The picture from 2007, a summer in Long Island, of a man who believed he could have everything: love and power, passion and profit. That man had been a fool. Outside, the sun finally set, and Manhattan lit up with millions of lights. Thomas remained there, in the dark office, holding a photograph of a past he had traded for a future he now realized had always been hollow. But maybe, just maybe, there was still time. Not to fix the past, it was irreparably gone, but to build something new, something real, something that mattered more than contracts and deals and many zeros on bank accounts. He looked at the phone, thinking of calling her, but he knew Clara needed space. She had spent 6 years protecting Lily alone. She wouldn't trust him overnight, and maybe she shouldn't. But for the first time in a long time, Thomas Harrington knew exactly what he wanted. Not a merger, not an acquisition, not another zero added to his net worth. He wanted to be a father, and this time he wouldn't let anything, not pride, not fear, not a damn empire, stand in his way.